What is good, everybody? Welcome to College Baseball Done Bettor. I'm your host and analyst today, Johnny VTV. My guy, Greg L. He had a model booking for GQ. Just kidding. He had some stuff to do with ESPN Chattanooga today. So I am filling in for him as well as myself. It's that time of the year, college baseball. It's like Christmas for me, combined with like Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day, Columbus Day, St. Patrick's Day, all that good stuff. For the entire month, we're going to be taking you through all of the great college baseball bets for both games and futures. But to start it off here, before I get into the game by games, I think it's important to address how you can attack some of these regional prices. So for certain regions, I think there are vulnerable one seeds that I wanted to talk about, possibly grabbing some value elsewhere from the 2 to the 4 seeds. Now, for instance, the first one I wanted to talk about is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State being the 1 seed in the Stillwater region, I think is one of the most vulnerable ones that is out there, because you have a 2 through 4 field in this region that is all capable of winning this. I think let's start with Dallas Baptist. They're one of 2 teams in the entire NCAA that are top 12 in home runs and stolen bases. They have good pitching. Dallas Baptist is a 45-win team this year. They have a lot of different ways to beat you, and they're in the plus 250, 260 range, depending on where you're looking. So I definitely think DBU is a candidate to steal one. They have the first game against Washington. That's something we're going to be talking a little bit later about. Next, the Washington Huskies. If you've been following this program all year, you know that I've been on the Huskies. I'm a fan of this team. They have some really good pitching with Stu Flensland III, Kiefer Lord Sosa, some good hitters with Cam Clayton, AJ Guerrero, Will Simpson. But the problem with Washington, well, I do think if they decide to show up and play a complete weekend, they have a case in the plus 300 range to grab this region. You know, it's definitely possible. But the team that I really wanted to talk about was Oral Roberts. This is arguably my best 4 seed to advance out of this weekend. Because if you look at the Golden Eagles, this is a team that won the Summit League. They were over 45 wins. They have 3 pitchers, their entire 3 starting rotation guys, all have an ERA under 3.5. They have a really good offense that's complete with average, home runs, steals. They find ways to score, get on base. So it's actually funny because Oral Roberts, I gave them out at 9-1 yesterday on Caesars, yesterday afternoon. An hour later, they were back down to 7.5 on Caesars. And I did a couple of podcasts talking about this. Woke up this morning, the Golden Eagles are now plus 475 to win the region. So the movement was so dramatic. And I still think there's a little bit of value at plus 475. I just think, you know, because people have been taking a piece of them, that's probably why that number's been steamed. I took a little long shot on them to win the whole thing, because if there's a 4 seed that can advance to the Omaha College World Series, I think it is Oral Roberts. They're at 500-1. But let's move on here. The next one that I would say is probably going to be the Terre Haute region. Indiana State, the Sycamores. Don't really buy them. I don't understand how they're hosting in this day and age, in this economy. We can't be having this kind of a team hosting. They're not really that good, and they don't really deserve to be there over a team like Campbell per se. But I think Indiana State is definitely a candidate to lose tomorrow, Friday's game 1 against Wright State, another tough 4 seed. But in the event that they don't lose, which they probably shouldn't, I think they're most likely going to have to play Iowa over UNC. Now, Iowa-UNC is one of my favorite matchups of Friday. So, again, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But for the Hawkeyes, I think they were in the plus 230 range when I gave them out earlier in the week. I think if you can get them anywhere from plus 180 or better, it is definitely the bet to take them. Don't be suckered into UNC. North Carolina is not going to win this region. And the main reason, I think, aside from the fact that their pitching is not good, starting pitching is very suspect, as well as that bullpen. But one of the things that makes the Tar Heels so dangerous is their superstar 5-tool center fielder, Vance Honeycutt, a true prospect that might go number 1 overall in 2024. He's out this weekend. He has a lower back injury. Head coach has already said he's not going to play. So that is a huge red flag for the Tar Heels this week. And I don't think they're going to make it out. I think they're going to have an early exit. So don't be suckered in by the Tar Heels because of their nice uniforms and the fact that they're a historic program. Not going to happen. And I would say the last region I think we have to be on the lookout for is the Columbia region. South Carolina, a team that was very suspect throughout the year. They were, in the first half, arguably the best team in college baseball. They looked like they were real bid to have the number 1 seed, but ultimately they faded quickly in the second half. They had some key injuries, sure. Noah Hall, they lost Will McGillis, they lost a couple other arms, so it makes sense. But aside from that, they still have enough horses. They really faded in the second half and did not play well. So this was going to be a big issue if South Carolina was going to host. But despite how bad they finished, the committee gave them their overall body of work and decided to let them host. Now, of course, one of the teams that got hosed, my Campbell Camels, the team I've been talking about the entire year. They should have been a host, and I wanted them to be because the crowd, I think they were going to put a bill in if it was Fayetteville in North Carolina, but this would have been an electric crowd, and this team is so good, man. Campbell is the only team in the country to be top 10 in steals and home runs, and they're also 11th in batting average, and they have a sick ace Friday guy by the name of Cade Cooler, first round potential up to 97, 98 with a power slider. He's a gamer. He's the kind of guy you want to throw in a big game. And that's what they have in this Campbell team. And, it kind of sucks for me because, having such big futures on Campbell, I was hoping that they would be in a little bit better of a draw. Again, second year in a row, they had a bad draw because they had Tennessee last year, but they have to go through South Carolina and probably Florida in the Supers to make it to Omaha. I do think it's possible, but the NCAA has continually done them no favors. But Campbell's got a chip on their shoulder. This is a team that can give a lot of problems to any opposition they face. And I think Campbell in like the plus 215, plus 230 range to win this region is the right side ultimately because, despite how difficult the NC State matchup I think could be, they're a better team than NC State. And this is another one that I want to talk about when we get a little bit more into the game by games. But South Carolina is reeling right now. I'm not sure they're going to win it. The problem with them is their pitching hasn't been good, but what's really driven them this year is their hitting. The guy who was probably going to be the freshman of the year, Ethan Petrie, has fallen off a cliff. And it's not a coincidence that once he went down in terms of production, the rest of the team kind of followed him. This Gamecocks offense really goes as Ethan Petrie goes. And, now I would think the SEC freshman of the year doesn't even get the freshman of the year honors. It's probably going to go to Charlie Condon of Georgia. But one more region that I did want to touch on, and this is a little bit more in terms of like the higher seeded regions. This is the national seed Clemson Tigers. So I've been talking about this for a while. I think Clemson, they're a solid team, but they're really hot. They're playing hot. They got like this magic pixie dust around them where just everything is going their way. They're pushing all the right buttons. And listen, that's what it takes this time of the year. But this is also a Tigers team that didn't have any quality weekend series wins outside of Boston College. They lost to Wake Forest. They lost to Duke. They lost to South Carolina throughout the year. I mean, they beat Coastal twice in the midweek, but outside of Boston College, who we now know really isn't that good, and they beat Louisville, who was ranked at the time, who didn't even make the tournament. They don't really have many quality wins. They rattled off a lot of series victories. I think they're on like 16 or 17 straight wins. They beat a lot of the mid-ACC teams like Notre Dame and NC State and, teams like that. But, the guy to look out for this team, obviously, is Caden Grice, two-way player. He's a finalist for the John Olerud Two-Way Player Award. I still think Jack Caggs is going to get it. Grice is a really good pitcher and really good on offense, but I think he's better on the mound, more useful. He does come up in the clutch with some key hits. But the thing is with Clemson, they have a tough draw with Lipscomb, the 4 seed. That's not an easy out by any stretch of the imagination. But because how well Clemson is playing, I would expect them to get past Lipscomb. The big story here is this is where the Tennessee Volunteers reside. They're playing a difficult Charlotte team with Cam Fisher, who actually leads the NCAA in home runs because he's got 8 home runs in his last 9 games. He's got 30 on the year. I think Tennessee has a real shot to win this region. And the problem with the Volunteers has been playing away from home. And I went on with Greg actually on his radio show yesterday or 2 days ago and talked about this. I think that is completely mental. It's not physical. It's all in their head. I think they're more than capable of playing away from Knoxville, despite what they've shown. Sure, they won. They actually won the series at South Carolina last week of the season. But this time of the year, pitching travels. There's no team in the country that is better pitching front to back than Tennessee, except for maybe Wake Forest. And, if Tennessee's rotation shows up to what it's capable of being, they're going to challenge Wake Forest. It's really the offense that's got to get going. It's the bats. And I think the Charlotte first game it's not a layup. That's a tough game. But my feeling is what happens is Andrew Lindsay throws game 1 against Charlotte tomorrow. Assuming Tennessee wins that and assuming Clemson wins their game against Lipscomb, then Clemson and Tennessee will play, and we're going to get our boy Chase Dollander, a.k.a. Dolly, for that game against the Clemson Tigers. And that's really going to be the swing game of who has a great shot to win this region. Clemson and Tennessee are both neck and neck in terms of odds, but I think ultimately for the number, the Volunteers, to me, are the right side here. But, of course, it all depends on how well their hitting is going to travel because we know that pitching is going to travel. All right, so before we get into our game by games, let's take a look here. We got Fantasy Alarm All subscription. You get all pro access to Fantasy Alarm for the award-winning DFS playbook. For time, get all this for 50% off your first 6 months with promo code ALARM50 at fantasyalarm.com. Match up to $100 using promo code FANTASYALARM at fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Love our Fantasy Alarm guys. Absolute great addition to the Better Sports Network. They have so many great content creators and they have so much great information. And, if you're not taking advantage of this offer and, all the information they have to give, you're really doing yourself a disservice, especially come time for fantasy football season. We got the drafts coming up. We got all the study guides, everything that you need within the next month and a half, 2 months to get ready for your draft. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of that. Shout out to our guys at Fantasy Alarm, guys and gals. All right. So this is really where I wanted to get into. The regions are great, and I really do love them because you're able to capitalize on a lot of wrong numbers and wrong prices. But really, when you're looking at the game by games, this is where you have to really be sharp and on the money here. And there's a lot of different teams that I wanted to get into, and I think first off, we're going to start with the Campbell Camels against North Carolina State. So NC State. This is a team that got snubbed last year. Tommy White as a freshman, Tommy Tanks hit 27 home runs. And I'll never forget because the regional conference tournament game, I think it was the first day against Miami, Carson Palmquist, Tommy Tanks hits 3 home runs in the exact same spot, right center field. And, from that point on, I thought NC State was going to be a dark horse. Get snubbed. This year they come back. They're not as good, but they still find a way to make it in. And this offense has some boppers. They got a guy like Lou James, Gino Groover, who has a lot of power from the right side. Cannon Peebles, who's an absolute pest at the plate. He can hit as well. Decent pitching staff with Matt Willitson, Logan Whitaker. Don't get me wrong. NC State is a tough team, and I think they're definitely going to give Campbell a run for their money. They are a pest. They are not an easy out. But considering how Campbell has a chip on their shoulder, the committee kicked a hornet's nest. This is a team that is pissed off, that's ready to play, that knows they should be hosting. They're as good as almost any team in the country. So I think if you're able to get Campbell at this price in the minus 155, minus 160 range, it's fair game. I said it before. I think Cade Cooler does go game 1 because one of the interesting facts about college baseball this time of the year, almost always. So pay attention to this because almost always when the 1 plays the 4 seed, the number 1 team will usually throw their second or third best guy if they have that luxury. They want to save their ace for the Saturday game. They want to set themselves up to go 2-0 because if you go 2-0, a team has to come back in your own home building and beat you twice, which is very difficult to do. The 2 versus 3, because you want to get off to a hot start. The 2s and 3s, when they match up, they're usually going to throw their ace. So if that's the case, like I expect with Campbell, Cooler goes here. And whether it's Willetson or Whitaker for NC State doesn't really matter to me because Campbell's got a great pitcher who has a lot of strikeout stuff and who is capable of carrying the burden in a big game. And they have an offense that can absolutely hammer you every which way. Stolen bases, home runs, base hits, get hit by pitches, walks. Campbell is capable of putting up 12 to 15 runs on any team, any given day. I think the Campbells are the right side here. Your Honor, no objections. Next one here is the Dallas Baptist Patriots against the Washington Huskies. Now, this is a very difficult one because I alluded to this in the Oklahoma region. I think ultimately here, Dallas Baptist is the better team. Washington is a wild because you don't know what you're going to get from them. When they play their brand of baseball, they're really exciting to watch. They're a fun team. But at the end of the day, if Stu Flesland's throwing, I would expect Washington to hang in there a little longer because he's overall a pretty good pitcher, good lefty. But Dallas Baptist has got 3 pretty good arms. They have an offense that can get it done like Campbell in a lot of different ways. They're among the country in stolen base leaders as well as home runs. They're batting close to 300 as a team. They got a guy by the name of Grant Jay who hit over 20 home runs this season. He's kind of their de facto power guy. So I think Dallas Baptist at a short price here does make sense. Minus 135. I probably would play that out to like minus 145, 150. Washington winning wouldn't surprise you, but I just think Dallas Baptist is the better team. And I think if Oral Roberts doesn't deliver as the 4 seed, I think they might be able to. Dallas Baptist is definitely, the 1A. I have Dallas Baptist and Oral Roberts to win the Stillwater Regional, kind of 1A. Dallas Baptist is the 1, Oral Roberts is the 1A. So I actually think Dallas Baptist has the best chance to win this region because they're overall the best balanced team. So I think taking DBU game 1 really coincides with them trying to get the region here in the plus 230 range, 240, whatever you can get it at. So definitely like the Patriots here. By the way, I don't know anybody that's ever been to Dallas Baptist. I question if it's a real school or not. It sounds kind of made up, like the University of Phoenix, even though that's an online institution, but neither here nor there. Next one we have is the Louisiana-Lafayette Ragin' Cajuns. They're in the plus 140, plus 150 range, depending on where you're looking, and they're going against the Texas Longhorns. This is kind of a tough matchup for me because I want to pick Texas. I want to believe Texas makes a run this year, but in all fairness, I think their time passed. I think their time was last year. They had a guy like Pete Hansen, who's now a St. Louis Cardinal in the organization. Lefty that was just commanding the top of that rotation. You knew you were almost always going to get a good start from it. Then a guy like Lucas Gordon on a Saturday. They had Ivan Melendez, the Hispanic Titanic, hit 33 home runs last year, setting a single-season home run record, which is probably going to be broken this year most likely. But they had a lot of talent last year, and they couldn't make it happen. And now this year, their offense is very suspect outside of a few guys like maybe a Porter Brown and a Dylan Campbell. They're not a team that I believe in. And, I like Lucas Gordon, but even though his stats have been great this year, there's been some opportunities to get after him. And, if Louisiana-Lafayette, which what they do, how they really pester you is they get on base and they steal. They're among their top 5 in steals this year. They're really a tough team to deal with. They're one of those teams that they'll annoy you to death and they'll do all the little things. And I think the Ragin' Cajuns at this price is definitely fair. Lucas Gordon is probably going to go in this game. And, he's kind of dealt with some of these high pitch counts, only going 5 innings. And, Texas overall has a good staff on paper with Lucas Gordon as a Friday guy, LeBaron Johnson Jr. coming from a midweek to now a Saturday guy, and then Tanner Witt, who had first-round potential, being the Sunday guy, coming off Tommy John, easing back into it. But I think Louisiana-Lafayette for the price here is the right side. Texas is way too shady and hasn't done enough for me to really earn the consideration to be this high of a favorite. And Louisiana-Lafayette, the Ragin' Cajuns, are a very good and dangerous mid-major program. The next is going to be Troy against Boston College. So ignore that number on your screen. I made a mistake on the price. My apologies. Troy's actually plus 115, not plus 155. Boston College is a team that really has struggled in the second half. I think this team was peaking too early. They were fun to bet on earlier in the year, especially on a Saturday with a guy like Chris Flynn going on the mound. Troy is one of those mid-major programs that a lot of people don't know about, but they have some weapons in this offense. And I think just considering the fact that you're going to see a lot of upsets day one. I truly believe it. I think a lot of these favorites are probably going to lose day one. And, if I had to put a number on it, I would say at least 35-40% of the underdogs win the opening weekend just based off the numbers that I've been looking at. And I think Boston College is definitely on the table. Like, I don't know who they're going to throw because Chris Flynn he's their best pitcher, but he's been their Saturday guy, their number 2 guy. So I don't know if they throw him. They might throw John West. They might throw Henry Leak. I'm not really sure about this, but either way, just the way that the Eagles have been playing, I think Troy is really a team that you can look at for an underdog purpose. And, there's something that I wanted to stress. If you're looking at betting an underdog in college baseball, especially this time of the year, I think you have to wait until closer to game time, because what happens is a lot of people don't bet college baseball lines early in the week, mostly. There's not a lot of handle in college baseball in general. Tournament time, you're going to see more than usual, of course. It's the postseason. But what it is you typically don't see the underdogs get the best of the number until later in the week, because by that point, all of the people or most of the people have already steamed the favorite. So in a situation like Troy at plus 115, I might wait until tomorrow closer to game time if you wanted to get in on this, because I would think that Troy might be able to get up to like plus 125 if somebody comes in late and thinks Boston College is going to win. And, that also might be determined by the pitching matchup. Like if Chris Flynn pitches for Boston College, I would think more money comes in on the Eagles and gets this number up to like minus 165, something along those lines. All right. Oral Roberts against OK State. This is actually one of my favorite upsets of the day. I think Oral Roberts, they have 3 really good arms. I mentioned it before. Their starting rotation has 3 guys that have sub 3.5 ERAs. And ultimately, their offense is good enough that they do a lot of the little things correctly. I think at plus 170, it's a fair number. I would have liked to see this closer to plus 200. And, it might get there. This is kind of the same thing as Troy. Wait on this number a little bit. I don't know if people are going to take Oral Roberts right away, but I think the fact is, OK State, I want to see who they throw. The Cowboys don't have a great starting rotation. They have one pretty good Friday guy by the name of Warren Watts-Brown, transferred in from Long Beach State after they lost Justin Campbell last year to the draft. Watts-Brown has a lot of strikeout stuff, but he's very inconsistent. Their bullpen is inconsistent. Their offense has a few really good players, but then there's kind of a big drop-off. So they rely on guys like Rock Riggio, Nolan Schubar, Carson Benji, those kind of guys. And if they don't get the production from them, OK State's definitely live to lose this game. But I kind of want to see if we're going to get a little bit better number on Oral Roberts. Plus 170 is okay, but we're talking about a 4 seed against a 1 seed here. And, I think the odds makers kind of did a pretty good job, if I'm being honest. I would have liked to see it a little bit more, and we might get that. But then again, I think based on a lot of podcasts that I've been hearing, and, I put this out myself, like how good Oral Roberts could be in a dark horse Cinderella 4 seed, 11.7 and D1 baseball have been talking about that as well. So there's a good opportunity that this doesn't move, but either way, I would look at Oral Roberts because plus 170 is still a fair number. But most likely if you're going to take Oral Roberts, I would look at probably compounding what their money lines would be. If they beat OK State at plus 170, I would probably assume Dallas Baptist wins the first game. Then Oral Roberts would probably be a plus 150, plus 140 underdog to Dallas Baptist, and then to win that game. So it might actually make sense at this point, instead of taking them to win the region, to just take the money line every single time, assuming they win game one. That's probably how I would look at it. Now we have Iowa, -130 versus UNC at even money. I think ultimately, I discussed this before, Iowa is a Big Ten team. I don't love them. I think they're solid. They have some upside, definitely. I think Iowa wins this region. The Hawkeyes are in a pretty weak region here, and I think ultimately we're probably going to see Brody Brecht from Iowa throw game one. This is a guy who's a two-sport athlete. He dropped football earlier this year to focus solely on baseball. He wowed at the Round Rock Classic against LSU. This kid's coming out throwing 102, 103, power slider. He has premium stuff, premium arm talent. He's going to be a top 10 pick next year. God forbid he gets his command under control consistently. This kid might be like the next Hunter Green. That's how elite his stuff is. So I think he's probably going to throw game one. And, Brody Brecht is kind of a roller coaster with him because he has the ability to go out there and walk 8 guys or strike out 15. Like you don't know, but he's been pretty solid this year overall. And like I said, UNC doesn't scare me. The big guy now with Vance Honeycutt out is Matt Horvath. Matt Horvath's the guy that hit over 20 home runs this year. And, they have somebody like Alberto Ozuna, Jonathan Vanderbeek, but UNC overall does not frighten me. I think at -130, you're getting actually a really good number. And the pitching matchup is definitely in favor of the Hawkeyes. So I would look at taking them over UNC. I think there's a real chance that UNC loses. If they don't go 0-2 right away, they're going to lose 2 of their first 3 games. I think they're heading for a quick exit. Next, we have Oklahoma against East Carolina. So Oklahoma was my dark horse Cinderella team. Well, it was Oklahoma and Texas A&M last year. I really loved Oklahoma coming into the tournament. I gave them out at 60-1, thought they might win it all. They stole bases really well. They hit home runs. Their pitching was lights out. This is when Cade Horton started really coming alive. He went top 10 in the draft to the Cubs last year. Made himself millions of dollars coming off Tommy John surgery because he just wowed in the College World Series. But the problem with Oklahoma, Skip Johnson, the head coach, had to completely rebuild this team. Oklahoma was the team that got gutted the most from last year's draft. They lost almost the entire lineup. Guys like Peyton Graham, who was their superstar, got drafted by the Tigers. They lost their entire starting pitching rotation. Jake Bennett, Cade Horton, David Sand lost their elite closer, Trevin Michaels. So it's been a struggle for Oklahoma this year. They were one of the last teams to make it in. And, I can never count them out because it's Skip Johnson team. But East Carolina, I actually have winning this region. I don't really think this region is that dangerous, to tell you the truth. And I think East Carolina ultimately is the best one because, to be honest, I don't believe in Virginia that much. And I think getting ECU in the plus 200 or better range is really where I'd be looking at. But ultimately for this matchup here, ECU is one of those teams that is relentless. Cliff Godwin has his bunch doing every little thing they can to win, and they will make sure if you beat them, you did every single thing and you drained your entire energy to do so. But I think East Carolina, assuming he's ready to go, would probably go Trey Savage to start the game. He's been their best arm all year. And I think East Carolina at this short -135 price would be the side here correctly. And I just don't know if Oklahoma's got enough arms to compete with East Carolina. Their offense is very shaky. They're relying on a big transfer class from the summer and fall. So I think the Pirates here are definitely the correct side and probably win the region if I'm being honest, because I don't believe in Virginia. All right, one more game that we have that I wanted to touch on here. It's the Cal State Fullerton Titans, who the Cleveland Guardians sensation Tanner Bybee went to. Cal State Fullerton runs a very good program, by the way, against the Texas A&M Aggies. So Texas A&M opened in the Stanford region. We didn't really talk about that region that much, but long story short, I think Stanford is also one of those 1 seeds that could be headed for a quick exit. I think A&M is definitely the team I would look at to bet that region. But for that to happen, they have to get off to a 1-0 start, almost guaranteed. Cal State Fullerton, they're not a pushover. They're not an elite mid-major program, but they're definitely good. They're capable of giving you a run for their money. And what Texas A&M did last week, I don't think enough people understand how impressive that was. They had to play 6 days in a row. They played 6 games in 6 days. That's unheard of at this level. And they were running out of arms. They still found ways. And, they lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC title game, but they really gave them a run for their money for 8 innings. And, before they just finally ran out of arms. And ultimately, I think A&M coming into this week is ready to go. They have their full complement. This is an Aggies team that's pitching was awful all year long. But last week, they found a way to get it all together, all their lefties, Troy Wansing, Justin Lampkin, Will Johnston, they all came together. And I think that's probably what you're going to get this weekend against Cal State Fullerton team that doesn't really have the horses to hang with the Aggies. And, the Aggies last year, like I said, the thing I said about the Aggies last year around this time, if their pitching can meet their hitting halfway, they're gonna make it far. And I believe that is the case this year based on how bad their pitching was, but what they showed last week. Their offense really only lost Dylan Rock. And Dylan Rock was a superstar. Their pitching lost Micah Dallas, who was a really good 2 in the tournament, and they lost closer Jacob Palish. But this year, I think A&M is one of those teams that could be another dark horse again and make a run. And I think they're probably going to go with either Nathan Detmer or Troy Wansing in game 1. And if they go with Wansing and he threw the way he did against Tennessee last week, I don't know if Cal State Fullerton has much of a shot. I would lay the money here at minus 165, minus 170, whatever the case is. But I also believe that the Aggies are a team that is capable of beating Stanford because I have a lot of questions about the Cardinal after Quinn Matthews goes. So that's pretty much it for us today. Definitely check in next week. Our boy Greg's going to be back. We're going to have a lot of opportunities to get into more of who we think is going to win the Super Regionals and the game-by-game breakdowns. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at _Johnny VTV. I'm going to be tweeting everything about college baseball this weekend, where there's opportunities to make money and bet the regions and who makes sense maybe in the futures market. Want to give a quick shout out to our guy Jared in the back. He's a superstar, got up this early to help us do this podcast, so we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, cash some winners, and you're watching College Baseball Done Better.